The single-surface planer planes lumber to an even thickness. It is usually one of the largest and most expensive woodworking power tools. This machine makes it possible to easily plane a number of pieces to exactly the same thickness. If its capacity permits, it can plane large glued assemblies, such as cabinet tops, to a uniform thickness. The question is often raised, why not joint both faces of narrow stock on the jointer instead of using the planer? Maybe this piece will help clarify this question. One face has been surfaced on the jointer, the other is still rough. We could smooth the rough face on the jointer, but the piece would not be the same thickness throughout. Regardless of the number of joint cuts, the piece would not have parallel faces. Running the same board through the planer will produce parallel faces because it cuts off the top in direct relation to the bottom. The cutter head is located directly below the exhaust shroud. The size of a planer is determined by the maximum width of stock it will plane. The length of the knives determines this width. This is a 30-inch planer. Therefore, it can plane stock 30 inches wide. This full-size illustration represents the principal parts of a planer. The parts represented are directly behind the chart in the relative position they are shown. The primary parts of a planer are the upper and lower infeed rolls, chip breaker, cutter head, pressure bar, upper and lower outfeed rolls, and a table that adjusts to various heights. This adjustment determines the finished thickness of stock being planed. Do not operate the machine unless the exhaust is running. This wheel raises and lowers the table. If several pieces are to be run, it is advisable to lock the depth of cut adjustment. A pointer indicates the distance between the table and knives. This is the on-off switch. This switch controls the feed roll speed. The number 1 setting produces the smoothest cut and is desirable for at least the final cut. The number 2 setting runs the board through faster. The resultant surface is slightly rougher, but if several passes are required, time can be saved by using this speed. At the 0 setting, the feed rolls do not rotate. The machine must be turned off before applying the brake. The planer is a self-feeding machine. The 4 feed rolls push and pull the stock past the cutter head. The top of the lower feed rolls is usually set approximately 8/1000ths of an inch above the height of the table. This reduces friction of the stock with the table. The height of the table should be set approximately 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch less than the thickness of the stock. As the stock is fed into the planer, the in-feed rolls grab the stock and push it under the chip breaker and into the cutter head. The upper in-feed roll has a corrugated surface and is usually made in sections so it will grip most any surface. The chip breaker prevents long chips and splinters from being torn out of the face of the wood ahead of the knives. The cutter head rotates in a direction opposite the upper feed rolls. The grain of the wood should angle down as it moves into the knives. The pressure bar exerts pressure on the newly surfaced board and holds it firmly to the table. As the stock progresses, it is squeezed by the 2 smooth outfeed rolls and is pulled on through. The stock must be as long or longer than the distance between centers of the infeed and outfeed rolls. The distance between centers of rolls on this planer is 14 inches. Pieces shorter than this will stick and not feed through. As the board is released by the infeed rolls, it will not reach the outfeed rolls and consequently cannot be pulled through. Actually, the stock must be planed for 14 inches or it will become stuck. This unusual piece is 14 inches long and 7/8 of an inch at its thickest point. A maximum cut of 1/8 of an inch will not remove enough wood to allow the outfeed rolls to pull it through. It may be necessary to remove part of the excess wood by hand or with some other power tool such as the bandsaw before running it through the planer. Before using the planer, obtain permission from your instructor. Make sure no others are in the operator's safety zone. And protect your eyes by wearing safety goggles. Do not run stock that has been sanded or painted because it will dull the knives. Use only clean lumber that is free from loose knots or other structural defects. When a board is not smooth and flat, plane one face true on the jointer before sending it through the planer. This piece has now been jointed. The planer surfaces the top in direct relation to the bottom, so place the flat, smooth face down. The depth of cut scale indicates what the thickness of the stock will be after it has been planed. Therefore, to calculate the correct setting, measure the thickness of the stock to be planed. Subtract the approximate cut desired, and the difference is the correct setting. A maximum cut is 1/8 inch on narrow stock and 1/16 or less on wide stock. If more than this is to be removed, it will take more than one pass through the machine. For example, if narrow stock measures 1 inch thick and we want to remove the 1/8 inch maximum, set the pointer on 7/8 of an inch. Then run the stock through. If the finished thickness is to be 3/4 of an inch, reset the indicator to 3/4 of an inch and run it through again. Allow material to travel completely through the planer before making any additional depth of cut adjustments. Do not run wood through more than once at the same setting. If this piece is run again at the 3/4 inch setting, nothing will be removed, but the corrugated infeed roll will press indentations into its top face. Always feed the stock with the grain, never across the grain. Do not attempt to plane plywood. Feed pieces by the edges. Never put fingers between stock and the infeed table. After the stock starts through, remove hands from the stock and stand in an upright position to the side of the machine to avoid being in line with a possible kickback. Keep hands away from the feed rolls and away from boards gripped by the feed rolls. Be careful not to stand directly in line with the machine, and never attempt to look through the feed rolls when the machine is running. Carry stock around the planer. Do not hand it over the top. Turn off power after using planer and stand by until the machine has stopped. If stock becomes stuck while being planed, quickly shut off power and stop machine with the brake. Different makes of machines may need special directions concerning this and other malfunctions. Notify the instructor of a malfunction before attempting to run the stock again. The two primary reasons for stock becoming stuck are trying to plane stock shorter than the distance between feed rolls, or as illustrated, attempting to run rough or irregular stock with its rough surface down on the table. Always have a helper tail off long or heavy stock. Extremely long stock should be supported on both ends. Thin stock will tend to bow down or vibrate and be caught in the planer. Run stock 3/16 of an inch thick or less through the planer on top of a surfaced support board. The support board should be at least 3/4 of an inch thick and wider and longer than the thin piece to be planed. Adjust the depth of cut to slightly less than the combined thickness of the two pieces. Place the thin stock on top of the support board and feed it into the planer as you would thick material. This is a special setup and should be checked by the instructor. Short pieces of the same thickness can sometimes be planed by butting them end to end and following the last short piece with a longer piece. This can be quite dangerous and should also be checked carefully by your instructor. Let's examine this operation step by step. The first short piece would become stuck by itself. It would not reach the outfeed rolls. If followed by a second short piece, the first piece would be pushed far enough to be grabbed by the outfeed rolls and pulled through. But the second short piece would still become stuck in the planer unless it is pushed through with another piece. The last piece through, therefore, must be at least 14 inches long, or as long as the distance between the infeed and outfeed rolls. If you plan to glue boards together and then surface the glued assembly, remember to leave the stock as thick as possible and definitely thicker than the desired finished dimension until after it is glued. For example, if you want an assembly to be finished at 3/4 of an inch thickness, you obviously cannot run individual pieces to 3/4 of an inch. Glue them together and run the glued assembly through the planer. To plane rough stock for the parts of a large item of furniture with a hand plane would take considerable time and effort. The planer easily and accurately completes this difficult task of planing the parts of this hope chest to the desired uniform thickness.